Marcus Chen had always been different from other humans, but he never knew just how different until the day Queen Zarathil of the Valorian Empire chose him as her mate. The selection ceremony had shocked everyone in the human colony on Kepler 442b. Humans were considered a minor species in the galactic community, barely worth notice, except as laborers or servants. The Valorians, with their towering crystalline bodies and telepathic abilities, ruled over 17 star systems. For their queen to choose a human mate was unprecedented. Marcus stood in the grand throne room of the Valorian palace, its walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, disappearing into shadows that seemed to move on their own. Queen Zarathil sat on her throne, a magnificent structure grown from a single piece of rainbow crystal. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with skin that looked like polished silver and eyes that shifted between purple and gold. "You seem nervous, little human," the queen said, her voice echoing directly in Marcus's mind. The Valorians rarely spoke aloud, preferring telepathic communication. Marcus tried to project his thoughts back, something he had been learning since arriving at the palace 3 months ago. "I still don't understand why you chose me, Your Majesty." Ringly. The queen's expression softened slightly. Around them, dozens of Valorian nobles watched with barely concealed disgust. Many had made it clear they thought the queen had made a terrible mistake. Some whispered that she had gone mad, that choosing a human would weaken their entire species. "There is something about you," Zarathil replied mentally. "Something I sensed the moment I saw you. A power that sleeps deep within you. My ancestors had legends about humans, stories that most of my people have forgotten." Marcus had heard hints of these legends from Kethvar, the queen's oldest advisor. The elderly Valorian had mentioned ancient tales of humans who could do impossible things, but he had never shared the full stories. Whenever Marcus asked about his past, Kethvar would change the subject or find urgent business elsewhere in the palace. The truth was, Marcus didn't remember much about his early childhood. His first clear memory was of being 8 years old in the human colony, living with foster parents who had found him wandering alone after a transport crash. The official record said his birth parents had died in the accident, but Marcus had always felt like important pieces of his life were missing. "Your Majesty," one of the Valorian nobles interrupted, stepping forward. Commander Thyssen was tall even by Valorian standards, with deep red crystalline skin that marked him as a warrior caste. "With respect, the human integration trials begin tomorrow. Perhaps we should focus on more pressing matters than ancient legends." Marcus tensed. The integration trials were a series of tests designed to see if he could truly function as the queen's mate and future consort. He would need to demonstrate knowledge of Valorian culture, show basic telepathic ability, and prove he could survive in their crystalline cities that were deadly to most organic life forms. Most importantly, he would need to show that he possessed some form of useful power. Every Valorian had abilities beyond telepathy. Some could manipulate matter at a molecular level, others could bend light itself, and the most powerful could even manipulate time in small ways. Humans, as far as anyone knew, had no such abilities. "The trials will proceed as planned," Queen Zarathil declared, her mental voice carrying an edge of authority that made several nobles take a step back. "But I have faith that Marcus will surprise us all." That evening, Marcus sat in his quarters, a surprisingly comfortable room despite being carved entirely from crystal. The walls glowed with a warm, golden light that responded to his emotions. When he was calm, they remained steady. When he was anxious, they flickered like candle flames. Kethvar entered without knocking, as was his habit. The old advisor's crystal skin had a milky, translucent quality that spoke of great age. His eyes, once bright purple, had faded to a pale lavender. "You're worried about tomorrow," Kethvar observed, settling into a chair that grew from the floor to accommodate him. "Shouldn't I be?" Marcus replied. "I'm about to take tests designed for beings who can read minds and reshape reality. I'm just human." Every 3. Kethvar was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke aloud rather than telepathically, which was unusual for him. There are things about humans that we have forgotten, things that were once common knowledge, but have been lost to time. Marcus leaned forward, sensing that he was finally about to learn something important. What kind of things? Long ago, before the Valorian Empire existed, when we were still confined to our home world, we encountered a species that terrified us. They called themselves humans, though they were far from the colony humans we know today. These beings could do things that defied our understanding of reality. Kethvar stood and walked to the window, looking out at the crystal spires of the capital city. They could survive in environments that should have killed them instantly. They could heal from injuries that would be fatal to any other species. Some could manipulate energy with their bare hands, while others seemed to exist partially outside of normal time and space. But that's impossible, Marcus said. Humans are fragile. We need breathing apparatus in most alien atmospheres. We have short lifespans and limited physical abilities. The humans you know are not the humans we once knew, Kethvar replied cryptically. Something happened to your species long ago. Some great tragedy or transformation that left most of your people with only echoes of their former abilities. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying that I might have these powers? I'm saying that Queen Zarathil chose you for a reason. She has the strongest telepathic abilities of any Valorian in 1,000 years. She can sense things about people that they don't even know about themselves. The conversation was interrupted by a low, thrumming alarm that resonated through the crystal walls. Both Marcus and Kethvar froze, recognizing the sound. It was the signal for an incoming attack. The shadows, Kethvar whispered, his mental voice tight with fear. Marcus had heard about the shadows, a mysterious enemy that had been attacking Valorian worlds for the past year. No one knew what they were or where they came from. They appeared without warning, struck with devastating efficiency, and vanished before any effective resistance could be mounted. Entire colonies had been wiped out, their populations simply gone without a trace. The walls around them suddenly shifted from gold to deep red, the palace's emergency lighting system, through the telepathic network that connected all Valorians. Marcus could sense waves of panic and confusion throughout the city. The capital is under attack, Kethvar said aloud, his voice grim. This has never happened before. The shadows have never been bold enough to strike at our homeworld directly. Queen Zarathil's voice suddenly filled Marcus's mind, stronger and more urgent than he had ever felt it before. Marcus, come to the throne room immediately. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. As they ran through the crystal corridors, Marcus noticed that the palace itself seemed to be in pain. The living walls flickered erratically, and several sections had gone completely dark. Valorian guards rushed past them, their crystalline armor glowing with built-in energy shields. The throne room was in chaos when they arrived. Dozens of Valorian nobles clustered around the base of the queen's throne, their mental voices creating a cacophony of fear and confusion that made Marcus's head pound. Queen Zarathil stood at the center of it all, her usually perfect composure cracking under the strain. Report, she commanded as Commander Tisson approached. The enemy ships appeared without warning, Your Majesty. They're unlike anything we've encountered before, completely black, absorbing light and energy. Our sensors can barely detect them. They're not attacking the city directly, but they're doing something to our people. What do you mean? The Queen asked. Thisson's mental voice carried a note of horror. They're taking our telepathic abilities. Every Valorian they encounter loses their mental powers permanently. The affected individuals report feeling empty, hollow, as if some essential part of themselves has been torn away. The Queen's face went pale, her silver skin taking on an almost white hue. For the Valorians, telepathy wasn't just an ability, it was fundamental to their identity, their culture, their very sense of self. There's more, Your Majesty, Thisson continued. The attacks aren't random. The shadows seem to be moving systematically toward the palace. It's almost as if they're specifically hunting for someone or something here. Marcus felt a cold realization wash over him. He thought about the timing, how the attacks on Valorian worlds had begun shortly after the Queen had announced her choice of a human mate. He thought about the legends Kethvar had mentioned. About ancient humans with impossible powers. "They're coming for me," he said quietly. Everyone in the throne room turned to look at him. The Queen's eyes widened as she read the certainty in his thoughts. "That's impossible," Commander Thyssen protested. "You're just a human. Why would the shadows care about?" His words were cut off as the palace shuddered violently. The crystal walls cracked, and several of the light sources went out entirely. Through the great windows of the throne room, they could see dark shapes moving between the crystal spires of the city. The shadows had arrived. Queen Zarathil gripped the arms of her throne, her knuckles white with strain. "All Valorians are to evacuate the palace immediately," she commanded telepathically. "Get to the emergency shelters in the deep caverns. Your Majesty, we cannot leave you." Several nobles protested. "That is an order," she replied, her mental voice carrying such force that several Valorians staggered backward. "Go. Now." As the throne room emptied, Marcus found himself alone with the Queen and Kethvar. The old advisor had remained despite the evacuation order, his ancient face set with grim determination. "You said the Queen chose me because she sensed something," Marcus said to Kethvar. "What did she sense exactly?" "What?" Queen Zarathil answered instead, her telepathic voice unusually gentle. "I sensed power, Marcus. Great power. But it was buried so deep that even you don't know it exists. I had hoped we would have more time before it needed to awaken." The palace shuddered again, and this time they could hear sounds from outside, not quite screams, but something worse. The sound of Valorians having their very essence torn away from them. "How do I access this power?" Marcus asked, desperately. "How do I use something I don't even know I have?" "I don't know," the Queen admitted. "The legends speak of humans whose abilities only manifested in moments of extreme need, when their survival, or the survival of those they cared about, was threatened." A section of the throne room wall suddenly went black, as if all light and energy had been drained from it. Through the darkness, they could see shapes moving beings that seemed to be made of living shadow, absorbing everything around them. The shadows had found them. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between the Queen and the approaching darkness. He didn't know what he was doing, didn't have any plan or strategy. He only knew that he couldn't let these creatures hurt Zarathil or destroy everything the Valorians had built. As the first shadow reached toward him with tendrils of pure darkness, Marcus felt something deep inside him begin to stir. It was like a door opening in his mind, revealing rooms he had never known existed. Power flowed through him, ancient and familiar, as if he was remembering something he had always known but had somehow forgotten. The shadow's touch burned against his skin, but instead of weakening him, it seemed to awaken something even deeper. Marcus could feel his perception expanding, his awareness growing beyond the confines of his physical body. He could sense the Queen's terror behind him, Kethvar's amazement, and something else, a vast network of power that connected every living thing in ways he had never imagined. But the most shocking realization was yet to come. As his newfound awareness expanded throughout the galaxy, Marcus discovered that he was not alone. There were others like him, humans with awakened abilities, scattered across dozens of worlds. They had been waiting, dormant, until something triggered their awakening, and that trigger had just been pulled. The moment Marcus touched the shadow's tendril of darkness, the universe exploded into clarity around him. Energy coursed through his body like liquid lightning, awakening systems and abilities that had been dormant his entire life. He could suddenly perceive reality on levels he had never imagined existed. The solid crystal walls of the throne room revealed themselves to be mostly empty space, held together by electromagnetic forces that danced like visible music. The Queen's telepathic emanations appeared as cascades of golden light, while Kethvar's ancient mind glowed with the deep purple of accumulated wisdom. But most shocking of all was what he saw when he looked at the shadows. They weren't alien invaders at all. They were corrupted Valorian's beings who had been twisted, and transformed by exposure to something that fed on telepathic energy. Whatever had created them had turned their natural abilities inside out, making them parasites that consumed the very thing they had once used to connect with others. "I can see what they really are," Marcus said, his voice carrying strange harmonics that made the crystal walls resonate. "They're your people, Zarathiel. Someone or something has weaponized them against their own kind." The shadow that had touched him recoiled, its form wavering as if Marcus's contact had somehow disrupted its structure. More shadows poured into the throne room. But they hesitated when they sensed the energy radiating from him. Queen Zarathiel stared at Marcus in amazement. His appearance was changing as his abilities awakened. His eyes now glowed with an inner light that seemed to contain swirling galaxies. Energy patterns flickered across his skin like living tattoos, and the air around him shimmered with barely contained power. "How is this possible?" she whispered telepathically. Marcus turned to face her. And when their eyes met, she gasped. Through their mental connection, she could suddenly perceive what he was seeing. The fundamental structures of reality laid bare. The connections between all living things, and something else that made her mind reel with its implications. "We're connected," Marcus said, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the fabric of space itself. "Not just you and me, but everything. Every conscious being in the galaxy is part of a vast network of quantum-entangled consciousness. That's what telepathy really is, not just mind-to-mind communication, but access to the universal consciousness field." Kethvar stepped forward, his ancient eyes wide with recognition. "The Builders," he whispered. "You're talking about the Builders." "Who are the Builders?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "A species that vanished eons ago," Kethvar explained. "According to the oldest legends, they were the ones who connected all conscious life in the galaxy through quantum entanglement. They created the consciousness field that allows telepathy to exist at all." Marcus nodded, understanding flooding through him. "Humans aren't just connected to that field, we helped create it. We're the descendants of the Builders, or, at least, part of them. That's why the shadows are hunting for me. Someone knows what humans really are, and they're trying to use that knowledge to control or destroy the consciousness field." The shadows pressed closer, but they couldn't seem to approach Marcus directly. Wherever his energy touched them, they became more solid, more real, and more recognizably Valorian. "I can cure them," Marcus realized. "I can restore what was taken from them." He reached out with his newfound abilities, extending tendrils of pure energy toward the nearest shadow. The moment his power touched it, the creature's form began to solidify and brighten. The darkness fell away like a shed skin, revealing a young Valorian female beneath. She collapsed to the crystal floor, gasping and disoriented but clearly alive and whole. "Viralyn!" Queen Zarathiel exclaimed, recognizing one of her personal guards who had disappeared during an attack on a mining colony 6 months ago. But the effort of restoring just one shadow had cost Marcus significantly. He staggered, feeling the immense drain on his newly awakened abilities. There were dozens more shadows in the palace, and thousands more across the galaxy. He couldn't restore them all, not without help. That's when he felt them other awakened humans across the galaxy, their consciousness blazing to life like stars being born. The trigger of his own awakening had somehow activated dormant abilities in humans scattered across dozens of worlds. On the mining planet Zerion 7, a human construction worker named Sarah Martinez suddenly found herself able to manipulate matter at the atomic level. On the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. 718, James Okafor discovered he could perceive and manipulate quantum probability fields. In the farming colonies of the Andromeda Reach, a group of human settlers awakened to abilities that allowed them to communicate directly with the living ecosystem of their world. Marcus could feel all of them through the consciousness field. Their amazement and confusion as ancient genetic programs activated within them. But he could also sense something else, a vast, malevolent intelligence that had been waiting for this moment. "The one controlling the shadows," Marcus said grimly. It's been waiting for humans to awaken. This was all planned. 5. Through the expanding network of human consciousness, Marcus traced the source of the corruption back to its origin. What he found chilled him to his core. In the dead space between galaxies, something that had once been magnificent had become twisted and hungry. It was a being of immense power and age. One of the original builders who had survived the eons by consuming the consciousness of other species. It had been systematically hunting down and corrupting telepathic races, using their abilities to feed its own endless hunger. The entity had been searching for humans for millennia, knowing that they possessed the key to accessing and controlling the universal consciousness field. It had finally found them by tracking telepathic emanations, using corrupted Valorians as bloodhounds to sniff out human settlements. But the entity had made one critical miscalculation. It had assumed that humans would be as vulnerable to corruption as other species. It hadn't anticipated that awakened humans would be able to resist and even reverse the corruption process. "It's coming," Marcus said, his enhanced perception detecting massive spatial distortions on the edge of the solar system. "The thing that created the shadows. It's heading directly for this world." Queen Zarathil rose from her throne, her silver skin now glowing with reflected energy from Marcus's awakened abilities. "What can we do?" Marcus looked around the throne room at the remaining shadows, then at the vast crystal city beyond the windows. Every Valorian on the planet was at risk, and based on what he was sensing through the consciousness field, similar attacks were beginning on other worlds throughout the galaxy. "I need to connect with the other awakened humans," he said. "Individually, we're powerful, but limited. Together, through the consciousness field, we might be able to do something the universe hasn't seen since the original builders disappeared." He reached out with his mind, touching the consciousness of each awakened human across the galaxy. Sarah Martinez on Zirion 7 felt his presence and responded immediately, her matter manipulation abilities linking with his energy control. Dr. Okafor added his quantum perception abilities to the growing network, while the settlers in Andromeda brought their connection to living ecosystems. One by one, dozens of humans joined the network, their combined abilities creating something greater than the sum of its parts. Through Marcus, they all gained access to each other's powers. He could suddenly manipulate matter like Sarah, perceive quantum probabilities like Dr. Okafor, and commune with living planets like the Andromeda settlers. But more importantly, their combined consciousness gave them access to the deepest levels of the universal consciousness field levels that even the corrupted builder entity couldn't reach. "I can feel it," Marcus said, his voice now harmonizing with dozens of other human voices across the galaxy. "The pattern that created all conscious life. The original code that the builders used to connect every thinking being in the universe." Queen Zarathil watched in awe as Marcus began to glow brighter, his body becoming translucent as it filled with pure energy. Around him, the remaining shadows were transforming back into Valorians, without him even touching them. The corrupting influence was being burned away by the sheer intensity of the collective human consciousness. "We can rewrite the code," Marcus continued, his individual voice now joined by a chorus of awakened humans. "We can strengthen the consciousness field itself, make it immune to corruption. But we need an anchor point somewhere to focus the energy." Kethvar stepped forward, understanding immediately. "The crystal core," he said. "At the heart of our capital city, there's a massive crystal formation that serves as the nexus for all Valorian telepathic communication. If you could channel your power through that." Marcus nodded, his enhanced perception already mapping the path to the core. But as he prepared to leave the throne room, Queen Zarathil caught his arm. "Marcus," she said aloud, her voice filled with emotion, "when this is over, when the entity is defeated, will you still be to you?" He looked at her with eyes that now contained the wisdom of the ages, but also something essentially human: warmth, compassion, and love. "I'll be more myself than I've ever been," he said softly. "This is who humans were always meant to be. This is our true nature, our real power, As they raced through the crystal corridors toward the core, Marcus could feel the corrupted builder entity drawing closer to the planet. Its hunger was so vast it had begun consuming space itself, leaving trails of absolute nothingness in its wake. When it arrived, it wouldn't just corrupt the Valorians, it would devour the consciousness of every thinking being on the world. But Marcus and his fellow awakened humans were ready. The power flowing through the consciousness field was building to levels not seen since the universe was young. Reality itself was preparing to be rewritten. The crystal core chamber was a vast spherical space at the heart of the capital city, its walls lined with formations of naturally occurring telepathic crystal. At the center, a column of pure crystal stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with the accumulated telepathic emanations of millions of Valorians throughout history. Marcus approached the column, feeling the power of the human consciousness network flowing through him. All across the galaxy, his awakened kinfolk were in position, ready to channel their abilities through the universal consciousness field. "Are you ready?" Queen Zarathil asked, her telepathic voice filled with a mixture of hope and terror. Marcus placed his hands on the crystal core, and immediately, the entire structure began to resonate with harmonics that had been silent for eons. The consciousness field itself awakened to its full potential, connections forming between every conscious being in the galaxy. "We're ready," Marcus replied, his voice now joined by every awakened human in existence. "It's time to show this entity what happens when you threaten humanity's family." When day, the corrupted builder entity was only hours away from the planet, its massive form blotting out stars as it approached. But for the first time in eons, it was about to face opponents who could match its ancient power. The corrupted builder entity arrived like a wound in reality itself. Marcus felt its presence the moment it entered the solar system. A vast intelligence that had once helped create the consciousness field, but now sought to devour it entirely. Through the crystal core and the network of awakened humans, he could perceive its true form, a being of pure thought and energy that had grown cancerous over the eons, consuming entire civilizations to feed its infinite hunger. "It's here," Marcus announced, his voice carrying across multiple dimensions through the consciousness field. Every awakened human in the galaxy heard him clearly, as did Queen Zarathil and the thousands of Valorians who had taken shelter in the deep caverns beneath the capital city. The entity's influence preceded its physical arrival. Reality began to warp around the planet, as space-time itself bent under the weight of its presence. The crystal spires of the Valorian capital started to crack and fade as their energy was drained away. Even the light from the system's star began to dim as the entity fed on the fundamental forces holding matter together. But Marcus was ready. Through his connection to the crystal core, he channeled the combined power of every awakened human across the galaxy. Sarah Martinez on Zerion 7 poured her matter manipulation abilities into the network. Dr. Okafor contributed his mastery over quantum probabilities. The Andromeda settlers added their life force connections. Dozens of others joined their unique awakened abilities to the growing tide of power. The crystal core blazed with light that transcended the visible spectrum. The telepathic crystal formations throughout the capital city began to sing in harmony, their crystalline voices joining together in a song that hadn't been heard since the original builders walked among the stars. "What is that sound?" Queen Zarathil asked, her telepathic voice filled with wonder and terror. "The song of creation," Marcus replied. His consciousness now expanded across multiple star systems simultaneously. "It's the frequency the original builders used to weave the consciousness field into the fabric of reality. We're not just defending against this entity. We're going to heal it." The corrupted builder entity finally materialized in the planet's upper atmosphere, a writhing mass of darkness and hunger that stretched across continents. Its form defied easy description. Sometimes it appeared as a vast tentacled creature, other times as a storm of living shadow, and occasionally as geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, its voice carried the pain and madness of eons spent alone in the void between galaxies. "Humans," it said, the word rippling through dimensions and causing several mountains to crumble from the sonic impact. "I have searched for you across time itself. Your species abandoned me, left me to fade while you retreated to your primitive worlds. Marcus felt a stab of ancient sorrow that wasn't his own. Through the consciousness field, he was experiencing the entity's memories, fragments of a time when it had been part of a collective of beings who worked together to connect all life in the universe. But something had gone wrong. A great catastrophe had scattered the original builders. And this one had been left alone, while its partners found ways to survive by merging with primitive species or hiding in pocket dimensions. "We didn't abandon you," Marcus replied, his voice carrying the authority of the entire human network. "We became something new. We chose to limit our power so that we could grow and learn alongside the species we helped create." The entity's laughter shook the planet's crust. "Chose to limit? You became weak, mortal, irrelevant, while I maintained my power by consuming those too weak to resist. Power without wisdom, without connection, without love," Marcus said, rising into the air as energy from the consciousness field lifted him bodily. The entity struck without warning, sending tendrils of pure corruption toward the crystal core. Where they touched the planet's surface, life withered and died. Plants turned to dust. The crystal formations cracked and went dark, and even the planet's magnetic field began to weaken. But Marcus was ready for the attack. Drawing on the combined abilities of every awakened human, he generated a shield of pure creative energy around the capital city. The corrupting tendrils struck the shield and simply stopped existing, not destroyed, but transformed back into their component atoms and redistributed harmlessly into the atmosphere. "Impossible," the entity said, its voice now carrying a note of uncertainty. "You are mere fragments of what we once were. How can you resist me? When me, with contrast me Renkari and Longresses. When possible. When contrast, when the flaunt time. Because we're not alone," Marcus replied. "We never were." He gestured, and suddenly the entity could perceive what Marcus saw through the consciousness field. Every intelligent being in the galaxy was connected Valorians with their telepathic crystal cities, the plant-like Verdani with their communion with living worlds, the energy beings of the Spiral Nebula who existed as pure thought, and dozens of other species. All of them were aware of the battle taking place. All of them were contributing their own small portion of will and energy to the defense effort. The entity had expected to face a handful of awakened humans. Instead, it found itself confronting the combined consciousness of an entire galaxy. "This is what we built," Marcus continued, his voice now harmonizing with billions of other voices. "Not an empire of domination, but a community of connection. Every species we helped develop telepathy. Every world we connected to the consciousness field. They're all part of the family we created together." The entity recoiled, its form becoming less stable as it encountered resistance on a scale it had never imagined. "Family?" it raged. "They are food. Resources to be consumed. They're our children," Marcus said firmly. "Our partners. Our future." The real battle began then. Not a physical conflict, but a struggle for the very nature of consciousness itself. The entity attacked with weapons of pure despair, trying to convince every connected mind that existence was meaningless, that individual consciousness was an illusion, that only by being consumed could they achieve true peace. But the network of awakened humans countered each attack with waves of connection and hope. Where the entity spread isolation, the humans provided community. Where it offered the peace of non-existence, they demonstrated the joy of growth and discovery. Queen Zarathil, still connected to Marcus through their bond, found herself at the center of the telepathic storm. Through Marcus, she could perceive the thoughts and feelings of humans across the galaxy. Their determination, their compassion, their absolute refusal to let the entity destroy what had been built over millions of years. "I can feel them all," she whispered in wonder. "Every human consciousness, burning like stars. How did we never see this before?" "Because we were sleeping," Marcus replied. "But we're awake now." The entity, growing increasingly desperate, began to cannibalize its own form for power. It drew energy from the corrupted Valorians it had created, dissolving them back into pure hunger and malice. But as it consumed them, something unexpected happened. The consciousness patterns of the corrupted Valorians, freed from their twisted forms, joined the galactic network. They added their voices to the growing chorus of resistance, their painful experiences serving as a warning and a rallying cry. Even your victims reject you, Marcus observed, his power now bright enough to illuminate entire star systems. They choose connection over consumption, community over conquest. The entity's form began to collapse inward, its ancient structure finally unable to maintain coherence against the combined will of an entire galaxy. But even as it weakened, it prepared one final, desperate attack. Drawing on reserves of power accumulated over eons, it attempted to sever the consciousness field itself, to cut the connections between all telepathic species, and return them to isolated individual existences. If it couldn't rule the network, it would destroy it entirely. The attack hit like a tsunami of psychic force, threatening to tear apart the very fabric of connected consciousness. Across the galaxy, telepathic beings screamed as they felt their connections to each other being severed. The crystal core cracked under the strain, and even Marcus staggered as the network began to fragment. But then something miraculous happened. The non-telepathic species began to sing. Humans who had not awakened psychic abilities, Valorian children too young for telepathy, mechanical intelligences that had achieved consciousness through different paths, all of them began to generate a resonance frequency that reinforced the consciousness field from outside its normal operating parameters. Life finds a way, Marcus said, smiling as he felt the network stabilizing and growing stronger than ever before. Consciousness isn't just about telepathy. It's about choice, about will, about the decision to connect with others despite the risks. The entity's final attack collapsed, and with it went the entity's last reserves of power. Its massive form began to dissolve. But instead of dying, it was being transformed. The combined will of the galactic network was healing its ancient corruption, restoring it to what it had been before eons of isolation and hunger had twisted it beyond recognition. "I remember," the entity said, its voice now filled with wonder rather than rage. "I remember what we were trying to build. I remember the joy of creation, the satisfaction of helping new life flourish." As the healing completed, the entity's form shifted and condensed, becoming something that looked almost human, but moved with the grace of a being comfortable existing across multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Thank you," it said simply. "I had forgotten what it was like to be part of something larger than myself." The immediate crisis was over. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Through the consciousness field, he could sense other corrupted builders scattered across the universe, entities that had chosen different paths to survive the great catastrophe that had scattered their species. Some had become parasites like this one, others had retreated into isolated dimensions, and a few had simply gone dormant for eons. "We have work to do," he said to the healed builder. "The network we've built here could be extended beyond this galaxy, could eventually reconnect all consciousness in the universe." The builder nodded. "The great work continues, as it was always meant to." Marcus descended back to the planet's surface, his enhanced abilities gradually settling into patterns he could maintain long-term. The other awakened humans across the galaxy were experiencing similar stabilization, their powers integrating with their human nature rather than overwhelming it. Queen Zarathil was waiting for him in the throne room, which had been restored to its former beauty by the overflow of creative energy from the consciousness field. The crystal core had not only repaired itself but grown larger and more complex, its structure now incorporating patterns that would allow even more species to connect to the galactic network. "So," she said with a slight smile, "are you still planning to take those integration trials?" Marcus laughed, a sound that harmonized with joy from awakened humans across the galaxy. "I think I might be overqualified at this point." "Perhaps," the Queen agreed. "But I still want to know if you can properly perform the tea ceremony of eternal bonding. Being able to reshape reality is impressive, but can you brew a decent cup of crystal tea?" Their laughter echoed through the palace, a sound of happiness and hope that resonated across the consciousness field to every connected being in the galaxy. The great work of building a truly connected universe had resumed, but it would be built on the foundation of individual relationships, personal connections, and the choice to reach out to others despite the risks. Kethvar, who had observed the entire battle from the safety of the deep caverns, emerged to find his world transformed. The Valorian capital city now glowed with new patterns of light that incorporated designs from dozens of species. The consciousness field hummed with activity as previously isolated species began to establish their first telepathic contacts. The age of separation is ending, the old advisor observed. A new age of connection is beginning. Not just connection, Marcus corrected, taking Queen Zarathil's crystalline hand in his own. Partnership, growth, the chance for every conscious being to become more than they ever imagined possible. Through the consciousness field, he could feel the agreement of billions of minds across the galaxy. They had faced the darkness of isolation and conquest, and chosen instead the light of community and cooperation. The universe would never be the same again. And for the first time in eons, that was cause for celebration, rather than fear. In the months that followed, the changes rippled outward from the Valorian capital to every world in the galaxy. The consciousness field, strengthened by its ordeal, began to facilitate connections between species that had never communicated before. New forms of art and science emerged from these cross-species collaborations, and several previously unknown forms of consciousness made contact for the first time. Marcus and Queen Zarathil's wedding became a celebration attended by representatives from across the galaxy, both physically and through the consciousness field. Their union symbolized the new era of cooperation between species. But more importantly, it was a testament to the power of individual choice to reach across vast differences and forge meaningful connections. The awakened humans took on roles as facilitators and healers, helping other species develop their own connections to the consciousness field and assisting corrupted beings who were discovered throughout the galaxy. They became teachers and students simultaneously, learning new forms of consciousness while sharing their own unique perspectives on existence. The Healed Builder entity established itself as a guardian of the consciousness field, working to locate and heal others of its kind while helping to expand the network to new galaxies. It chose to take a form that blended human and Valorian characteristics, a living symbol of the cooperation that had made its healing possible. And at the center of it all, Marcus Chen, once a forgotten orphan on a human colony world, served as the primary anchor point for the expanding network of consciousness. But he never forgot that his true power lay not in his individual abilities, but in his connections to others. The galaxy had awakened to its true potential. The age of isolation was over, and the age of infinite possibility had begun. The real battle was about to begin.